Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our chats with Emily as we're calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson contained in the Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 143, For Every Bird a Nest. This is another poem about poetry, and I love it because the poem itself is actually about comparing two birds, the wren and the lark, and the way in which they build their nests. Many have read this poem as Emily's attempt to try to comment on her own aspirations, her own ambitions. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already worked through the preceding introductory set of comments as well as all of the preceding 142 poems. We just finished with Whose Are the Little Beds. Now, again, the comparison here matters. Now, Emily, in her fourth letter to Thomas Higginson, described herself as, quote, small like the wren, end quote. And Jane Donahue Eberwin, a scholar, suggests that Emily identifies herself with the wren in this poem to suggest to Higginson her ambitions are mighty as a poet. She's not going to write, if you will, ordinary poems, the obvious, the easy poems, but rather she has a proud desire to do something other. Now, the question is, can you be too ambitious? And I think Emily dances in this poem. I use that word dancing intentionally. You'll see why in a second. I think very well in this poem. Let's enjoy it. For every bird a nest, wherefore in timid quest some little wren goes seeking round? Wherefore when boughs are free, households in every tree, pilgrim be found? Perhaps a home too high, an aristocracy, the little wren desires. Perhaps of twigs so fine, of twine in superfine, her pride aspires. The lark is not ashamed to build upon the ground her modest house. Yet who of all the throng dancing around the sun does so rejoice? Now, I love that we will begin with an extended word picture or conceit of the poet as a bird. And you have two options. You have a bird like the wren, who will build his nest up high, or like the lark, who will often build his nest lower, even on the ground itself. For every bird a nest. Nesting here, of course, equals ambition if you read this poem as a bird, as a poet. Every poet has some goal, some nest, some desire, some ambition. Wherefore, in timid quest, some little wren, by the way, the word quest in poem 793, we'll see it as baffles quest. It's the only other use of the word quest. Some little wren, and as we pointed out in 172 poems, Emily loves this word little. We're going to get it twice in this poem. Of course, we've seen it. We saw it in the first line of poem 142 with little beds, right? Some little wren goes seeking round. I cannot help but read this word wren and think about what Lady Macduff says in Macbeth 4:2. We've given full lectures at learnstrong.net. Do you remember this, what she says to Ross? That even the poorest wren will, she says, the most diminutive of birds will fight to protect her children against the owl, right? Some little wren goes seeking round. And I think seeking is the key word here. That is to say, Emily, who imagines herself as the small, the little wren, at times timid wren, I think she is saying, my quest is actually not timid at all. Wherefore, when boughs are free, households in every tree, pilgrim be found. Now, just to remind you, and I promised you guys we would do this. Remember when we hit poem 35, nobody knows this little rose, it might a pilgrim be? Did I not take it from the ways and lift it up to thee? Poem 35. Or how about poem 101? Do you remember this one? When we were playing this game, will there really be a morning? Is there such a thing as day? Could I see it from the mountains if I were as tall as they? Has it feet like water lilies? Has it feathers like a bird? Is it brought from famous countries of which I've never heard? Oh, some scholar, oh, some sailor, oh, some wise man from the skies, please to tell a little pilgrim where the place called morning lies. Here, notice we're back to the idea of pilgrim. Wherefore, when boughs are free, households in every tree, pilgrim be found. The source, maybe we would say, of poetic inspiration And then she uses the word perhaps, as she did in poem 142, as she does so regularly, most significantly in poem 696, when she talks about acres of perhaps. Perhaps a home too high. And my Emily group brilliantly points out that Emily could be referencing the fall of Icarus here. The Daedalus Icarus story, they're going to fly away. Icarus the son will not listen to Daedalus the father, the dad, and will fly too close to the sun, and of course the wax melts off his wings and down he flies. Perhaps a home too high, aristocracy. Now, in poem 1627, when we get there, we will have a version 1 of version 2. Version 2 reads, "The pedigree of honey does not concern the bee. A clover any time to him is aristocracy." It's the other use of this word, aristocracy. And then she'll continue. "The little wren desires," and again we're back to this referencing of Macbeth 4:2. "The little wren desires," notice perhaps, "of twigs so fine," and I think fine works very well with the word pride, "of twine in superfine, her pride aspires." Now I'd be remiss at 2b if I didn't point out, notice nest, quest, free, tree, round, found. Emily's obviously playing poetic close form here, and she's playing this game. "Perhaps of twigs so fine, of twine in superfine, her pride aspires." And again, that word aspires works with the word quest and seeking. "The lark is not ashamed to build upon the ground her modest house." Obviously modest as opposed to something elaborate, something fine, something majestic. "Yet who," notice this poem ends with a question, "yet who of all the throng," that's an important word I think for Emily, "dancing around the sun does so rejoice." Now she'll use the word dancing in poem 369, but it will be in poem 605 that we're going to be very interested in her use of this word. She'll say, "The spider holds a silver ball in unperceived hands, and dancing softly to himself, his yarn of pearl unwinds." The idea of dancing is, I think, a central motif for Emily. The idea of having so much joy. Well, what exactly is it that Emily's doing here? I think she's arguing that great artists always aspire to greatness. Their ambitions take them there. And Emily, I believe, sees herself worthy of that level of ambition. I love it to be the comparison technique, the lark versus the wren, the symbolism, of course, of the wren versus the lark. However, 3a, I want you to think about Milton and those opening lines in Paradise Lost. Go back to the stanza, "Perhaps of twigs so fine, of twine in superfine, her pride aspires." Do you guys remember when we did Paradise Lost, we gave full lectures, they're archived at learnstrong.net. Do you remember that in those opening lines, Milton says that he will attempt things unattempted yet in prose or rhyme? I would love to have a real face-to-face with Emily. I'd even sit behind a door to ask her this question. 2 questions. Tell me what you think of Milton in Paradise Lost, and tell me what you think about Milton's attempt to do something, as he says, unattempted yet in prose or rhyme. Did you have any interest in doing something similar in your own poetic venture? I'd be fascinated with a question like that. Finally, at 3b, how can we own a poem like this? What was a time when you danced around the sun? I love that question. I love this line. I love that Emily sees herself dancing around the sun. And how about this? Do you think as an artist that you can be too ambitious? And where do you put Emily in all of this? I hope that Emily is challenging you to think. Thank you.